Hey there, it's Felice, and you're listening to Work It, the only podcast where we get honest about your situation at work. Today, we have a special event in store for you. I want us to step into 2024 with courage, confidence, and intentionality. We can now safely say that the pandemic is behind us. Really in 2022, it was sort of like, well, I don't know. It feels like it's behind us, but maybe it's not. 2023 was really about getting things that the pandemic put out of alignment back into alignment. And so as we enter 2024, from the workplace to the economy, things seem to be shifting to bring us back into alignment. So, with that said, our goal is to help you get realigned with your values and what's most important to you or your organization in terms of the workplace. So, if you're an organizational leader, we are here to help you get your organization back in alignment with its core values and relationship with your employees. And if you're an employee within an organization, our goal is to help you get back in alignment with your personal values and make better workplace and career decisions. So, that said, I have a very special guest here with me today, and she'll be with us periodically through 2024. I am pleased to welcome Liz Mohler, a renowned executive coach. Liz, welcome.
Thank you so much. Excited to be on the podcast.
So, Liz, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
My background is career development, career coaching. I feel like I've been doing coaching since before coaching was a thing. I'm originally from Madison, Wisconsin, and I'm a faculty brat. My father was a professor, so it's not unusual that I followed in his footsteps, started working at colleges and universities, got a degree in psychology. What do you do with that? You go get a master's degree. So I went on to get a master's degree, and I realized I really liked coaching and counseling people to make healthy decisions. So it all kind of started to evolve around helping college students graduate and get jobs. And then I started coaching at colleges and universities, teaching at Pepperdine, guest lecturing in the MBA programs at UCLA and USC, and really helping people launch into their careers. And so I've gone back to the International Coach Federation and gotten certified, got my ACC, then back to get my PCC, which is a professional certified coaching sort of a certification and a membership in the coaching community, and pivoted from career counseling at government and career counseling at colleges and universities to executive coaching. So I'm currently very busy working with Chief, which is a women platform for women trying to aspire into the C-suite. So coaching senior women leaders to become chief marketing officer, chief financial officer, chief executive officer. So I'm really thrilled to be on this podcast because it is really all about working it. And it's not just working it from the employee side, but also from the employer side. And I think that's kind of your area of expertise, where you come at it with, how do we make sure these companies are doing the right thing? And then I come at it from the employee side. How are you being a good boss? How are you being a good manager? How are you taking care of your own career management? So I'm super excited because core values is a bit of a foundation that I work with when I'm doing one-on-one coaching. And so to be revisiting the values is a conversation that you and I had, and I'm just excited to be digging in on it during this podcast.
Absolutely, Liz. For me, it's all about mutual dignity and respect, right? Everyone needs to work in a dignified manner, be treated with dignity, and be treated with respect. So, whether we're talking about organizational leaders or we're talking about people who are in the staff and in the employee ranks, everybody wants dignity and respect in the workplace. So, even if you're not in the C-suite, folks, Liz is with Chief, and she helps people in the C-suite as well as those who are not. This is for you. I don't care if you're in the mailroom or in the C-suite, if you're in the cafeteria or out doing the lawn, if you are a middle manager, this is for everybody who works in the workplace, right? So Liz is going to help us get in alignment with our values, in terms of who, for what, where, and how much when it comes to work. I'm talking about making values based decisions in our career and our profession. So, Liz, let's just hop right on into it. How's that?
Sounds good. Sounds good.
All right, all right. So, should we kick this off in terms of the new year and the beginning of this show with our word of the year? Do you have a word of the year?
You know what? I always choose a word of the year. In years past, I last year's word was curiosity. And I really leaned into that because I was curious about opportunities, possibilities. I had an interesting opportunity to get certified in a personality and assessment tool. And I was just so curious about it. And it was based out of a company in Paris, France. And I thought, well, that's unique. I can do this on Zoom and I want to know what Europe is up to. And then 6 months later, I was curious about a colleague of mine who was hosting a retreat and it happened to be in France. And I thought, well, I've never been to Provence. This is an opportunity to maximize business and pleasure. And having that word of curiosity as a word of the year just sort of anchored me in making my decisions. So I'm a huge fan of word of the year. What about you? What was your word of the year last year?
Well, last year, I think I can say values, right? Which is why we are going to open up this year talking about values because really I started getting more dialed into what my values are in terms of my career and my profession and just as an individual. As the year progressed, and we're going to talk about that a little later. But going into 2024, I actually have two words. Now, these words might change, but as of right now, my two words are confidence and courage. I want us to go into 2024 confidently, which means bold, right? And not arrogance, but being self-assured in what our abilities are and what our opportunities are, right? And being willing to address those as well and having the courage to do so. So
Yeah.
I'm going to go with two: confidence and courage.
I love it. I love it. And I love the fact that you've got 2 because you're gonna play with them all year long, and it's like one leads into the other. And sometimes we have to show up and that confidence is there, but before we show up, we gotta have the courage to show up. And then it's a cycle because we don't always feel like we have that courage, but deep within us, we gotta keep motivating forward. That's a good one. My my word of the
Absolutely.
year is focus. I am excited about, and I've only been blending it into my like every day for 2 or 3 weeks now. And I said to myself, let me play with focus for a while. And maybe it's because I'm feeling a little hectic in the holidays and I now need to focus. I need to slow down. I need to calm down. And so I have a lot of like ideas and thoughts. And part of me says, let it go and just focus. So that's my word of the year.
Absolutely. I love focus. I might add a third word. Okay, so let's dive right in, Liz. Can you help us understand? I mean, what is value-based decision making? Like, what is that?
Well, let's start with what is a value or where
Oh,
do our values come from? Because I think a lot of people just are like, well, what are values? Like, when I'm doing a workshop and I've got a whole audience of people in the room, I'll ask them, where do your values come from? And a lot of times they come from our family and our upbringing. I think I brought that up because my father was a Shakespeare professor. So reading and writing and academics and being like a lifelong learner, that's a core value I've had since I was born. But values also, we get them from our environment, we get them from culture, we get them from the family and jobs and the places we're surrounded. So values are kind of what's really, really, really important to you. So when
mm,
we start talking about values-based decision making, we have to go back to, well, what are your values?
okay, okay. And so then, if we're saying values based decision making in career, it's
Yeah.
making the decisions based on what's really important to us.
Right. Right.
Really? And and to me, it sounds like what's most important as opposed to a whole list of important things.
Absolutely. I have what I call a handful of Lizisms, and I'll probably pepper this podcast with some Lizisms.
Bring it
But one
on.
of the, you ready? One of them I call the $1 million question. And I tell my clients, just write down $, question mark, circle it, put a heart around it. Because the $1 million question is for you. What exactly are you looking for?
Mm.
And that's the $1 million question that most of my clients come to me and they're like, I'm either going to quit or get fired. I'm not happy where I am. Or I
Mm.
just want more in life. Something's just not, it's not resonating anymore. Maybe
Mhm.
I'm where I am, but I want to be somewhere else. And so my $1 million question was, well, what exactly are you looking for? And
Wow.
inevitably, sometimes my clients are like, I don't know. I don't really know what I want. So one
Right.
of the first things I do is I say, all right, let's start with the foundation of who you are and
Mhm.
what's really, really important to you. So I try
Right.
to interview them and pull out of them the answer to that $1 million question, but it's a hard question. And it's hard for a
Wow.
recent college grad. I coach a lot of students that are right out of college
Yeah.
or they've been out for a couple of years. But it's
Yeah.
also hard for people that have been working for a really long time because their values might have changed.
And so it sounds like you're saying that, the reason why we need to narrow this down and figure out what's most important to us is because we might find ourselves in a situation where we're so unhappy that we're going to either quit or we're going to get fired. Because trust me, people can tell when you're not happy, and your unhappiness is reflected in the work.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Got
So
it.
it's kind of,
Got it.
and we do need to revisit our values because our values change over our lifetime. And so to make it easier for some of my clients, I will give them a values exercise. And I was listening to one of your previous podcasts, and I know you came across my values exercise in a podcast that I had done before, and you did that. And I use different tools to help clients figure this out because I want to get them out of their head and start putting things on paper so it becomes concrete.
Okay, so
Because
Liz,
yeah,
let's talk about that. Let's talk about
okay.
how we identify our values. And for folks watching, we are going to put some information attached to this podcast in the chat section. And don't forget to subscribe and like this video while you're at it. And so, for you to be able to use to help identify your values. So, Liz, can you tell us about your process and about this? Really this evaluation page that you use.
Yeah, it's a tool, and I'll try not to make too much noise as I put my paper up. But this is an example of a values exercise. And this exercise that Felice is going to attach in her show notes has about 20 core values. And I tell my clients to read through these values and check the ones that are most important. And I tell them that they have to really put themselves in a frame of mind that this is for them. This is not what their mother would want them to do, or their father would want them to do, or their significant other. But this is for you to really take the time to sit down and ask yourself, what exactly am I looking for? What's important to me? And I sometimes use a tool called the Vista cards. And this can seem a little bit overwhelming because this is 52 core values. But if you Google values, you can go online and you can probably find a variety of people that are saying it's important to ask yourself what's really, really important to you. And sometimes journaling and just pulling it out of the top of your head is a little hard. Like I want it all. I want security and stability, but I want to make a lot of money, but I value my family and I value friendship, but I also want adventure and I also want excitement. And so what I tell my clients is you can't have it all. So
Right,
let's
right.
focus.
Right. Let's focus. And Liz, you're absolutely right. I watched one of the seminars that you put on or webinar on values, and it was very helpful to me because I've been journaling my whole life. Right. I've always journaled. I know what's important to me, but it was great to see it narrowed down and just some basic, one or two sentence descriptions. And what I really appreciated about your process is that although your list contains what 20 or so different
Yeah.
values, you encouraged the audience to narrow it down to 5. Like it can't
Right.
be all 20. Like you
Right.
have to decide what's most important to you. Now, some of after I heard your webinar, I actually went online and found a tool to help me narrow it down because I was checking every box on your list, so I needed some additional assistance. So I went on and on a tool online, and I answered a series of questions, and here's what it gave me, which I agree with. Right, so it says that my most important values are independence, creativity, growth, respect, and loyalty. And for me, all of those things are true. And when I say loyalty, it's not just loyal to a company, but it's how loyal do I feel that the company is to me, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah. And that's really the beauty of it, is for you to get into alignment for what exactly it is you're looking for. Because I know as a consultant, you have opportunities to do different projects, and you actually are in the driver's seat of looking around to see who's out there in the world that needs somebody like me. And having those core values, you're going to be able to have a little bit of a checklist as you're making some decisions. And this is where that values-based decision making comes into play. Because if I heard you correctly, it's about loyalty, growth, creativity, respect, independence. Those are all things that are important to you.
absolutely. And they're not in any type of order. Those are just all the things that are really, really important to me. And when I think back on my development, even when I think back as on myself as a child, right? And things that I did, activities I did, in the role I played in various groups or leading certain things, I can see in my personality still those things were still important, maybe in a different shape or form, but the core is still there. Now, Liz, since we're asking everybody else to identify their values and I've identified mine, what are your core values?
So it's sort of interesting when I am asked this question and I say to myself, "Ooh, it is a bit of like I have to, we teach what we most need to learn." And so I always need to keep myself in check with my own values. And so my list looks like this. I want to have fun. I'm at
Mm,
a stage in my life where I ask myself, is this project going to give me headaches or is this project going to be fun? And then I look into it and I say, knowledge. Will I learn something through this activity or will I be able to share something with this
mm,
activity? But I've also put wealth on my list, which didn't
mm,
used to be on my list. Back
mm,
in the day, I was more about helping and caring and caregiver. And now I'm actually to a point in my career where I'm like, you know what? I want to help people make money and I want to help people save money and I want them to help get solutions more quickly. And in
mhm,
doing so, I want to be valued for what I bring to the table. So I
mhm,
need to practice what I preach. So I've up leveled my job as well. So I can have a higher caliber of people. So I realize I'm valuing wealth. And
mhm,
then the last couple values are in there under adventure and excitement. I have a
mhm,
bad travel habit and I find that I can zoom from anywhere. And so if I have an opportunity to mix business and pleasure and have a little bit of adventure, I'm going to take on bigger projects that are more exciting because they're an adventure. So if somebody offers me an opportunity to do something that's boring, doesn't pay very well, is not fun, I'm gonna refer that to a colleague. I'm gonna say, "This is not where I am in life." But if they are building their business and they are more disciplined, more organized, more like ready to have a 9 to 5 and they wanna take on a project like that, I will pass the baton because those are things I
absolutely.
valued a while ago, but I don't value anymore.
Oh wow, and I love the idea of shifting. And Liz, when I hear you talk, there are things that when you say wealth, I hear independence. So my one of my values is independence, and when I think about that, that's independence from being bogged down by anything, right? And in order to have that level of independence, wealth is required for that, right? And I mean, in every
Right.
sense of the word, not feeling like you have to be bound by a particular schedule or particular job description. It's the freedom and independence to make decisions about what you want to do, how you want to do it, when you want to do it. And that requires, some other things, but wealth is really important to that.
Yeah.
And when I hear you talk about adventure, I think about creativity. So I think maybe that's why our personalities mesh so well, because I when I hear you, I'm like, yeah, that sounds great too. But I want to point something out, two things. Number one is that you talked about how these values, some of them are new. Maybe they
Yeah.
weren't values in the past, now they are now. So shifting values. And then I also want to talk about, you said, well, you would pass those opportunities on to a colleague. And
Mhm.
could it be because maybe those opportunities, excuse me, are more consistent with that colleague's values and where they are?
Absolutely, absolutely. And what you've pointed out is that we have to acknowledge of these 20 values, there's no right or wrong. And in any organization or company, you really do want people that have different values because they have to work together. And so it's really important to understand what your boss's values are because they may value attention to detail, accuracy, stability, security, and you're over here with creativity and independence, and that might not be a good match. And so understanding that people have different values and that's okay. Yeah.
And that's okay. I just want all of us to get that out there. That is
Yeah.
okay. And we're here to help you identify what your values are so that you can do an assessment of
Yeah.
where you're at. And you could say, okay, is this consistent? Because, if your boss's values are following policy and procedure, right? Having static order, such as like hierarchy. Well, that may not work for the creative free spirit that wants to travel and have wealth. That might not work. That might be inconsistent. So, how do we identify, Liz, what our organization or our boss's values are so that we can actually see if there's a match?
I love that question because I always feel like this is a light bulb moment when I'm doing a workshop. And I recently was presenting a workshop to a bunch of founders, and it was through Upfront Ventures, which is a venture capital firm. And I was on their, at their beautiful offices. And here's all these leaders of the organization, and they are looking to me for advice on being better leaders. And so I did a similar values activity with them where I was like, what's really, really important to you? Like, how do you lead? How do you embody who you are? Because how you lead and what's important to you is going to trickle down to the culture of the company. And
Ooh.
so we did this exercise, and I
Mm.
asked them to think about somebody that's been a good leader for them, like a role model. What did
Ooh.
they admire? What were the qualities of that leader? What were the core values that that leader had? And we
Mhm.
started out brainstorming, and it was interesting because I think we're all influenced by different leaders. So there was one young founder who said his biggest influence was a football coach. And he was
Yeah.
like, this guy was challenging, he was demanding. Another person said it was my father who was my first boss because I had to work for the family business, and he
Wow.
had discipline, but he also had creativity and problem solving. And then somebody else. So there's no right or wrong answer on that either. But I
Yeah.
said to them, you're the leaders. Are you communicating your core values to your employees? Because if
Yeah.
they know what's important to you, then they can follow along. But then I
Wow.
also challenge them, have you had a conversation with your employees to ask them the $1,000,000 question? What
Well, and I
exactly are
think that
they looking for?
and I think what you were talking about earlier is a lot of people don't know.
Right.
So if I am a supervisor or a boss or a leader and
Right.
I don't know,
Yeah.
and the employee, my team, whoever, right, they don't know. So it sounds
Yeah.
like everybody needs to do some introspection because sometimes, folks don't know. Or there's a mission statement, a general mission statement, and people
Yeah.
just regurgitate and just say
Yeah.
whatever the mission statement is, but they're not really thinking about what that means to them in their day to day and sitting down and doing the homework. So, folks, what I want to say, I want to encourage everybody to take out a piece of paper or get out your phone or your tablet or however you take notes and think about the leader that inspired you most, that you most appreciated, and what it was about that leader that inspired you, that
Yeah.
motivated you. What is it that you loved about that person, and why?
Right.
Why? And how does that relate to your personality? How did their personality work with your personality?
Yeah. And I love what you said about writing it down, because when we journal it, it makes it concrete. It takes it out of this up here. It takes it out of just being a list. And I'm looking at your list of creativity and growth, and even my list of knowledge and wealth. What does that mean? And the why? And how
Yes.
important it is to explain to people, the reason that I value knowledge is because I was raised in an academic, university town in Madison, Wisconsin. There's a lot of really smart people there, and we
Mhm.
share our knowledge freely. We are
Yes.
always wanting to, I give it away. I love telling people, here's what's worked for me, and maybe this will work for you. And
Yes.
why is travel important to me? Why is fun important to me? And this is why I lead the way I do.
Right, right, right. I love that, and when I think about my values and just the creative component, I've always been a creative, always, always, which is why I'm always wearing color. My I tell people my undergraduate degree is in creative writing. So, and I've always had a creative bend and had some sort of project going on, whether it's while I was in school or out of school that was a creative endeavor. So that creativity is really, 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 really key. And so when I think about what's really important and when I'm trying to make decisions, I'm often asking myself internally, well, how can I use my creative skills? Do I get to be creative? Or am I going to be asked to just follow a policy manual and just think like a robot? Right. Because that's not creative, nor is it independent. So,
Yeah.
um, I think,
Yeah.
I think, identifying what your employer's values are as well as our own values is really, really key. Because Liz, what happens when there is a misalignment with our values and the values of the organization or even the team that we're on?
That's a great question. And I think that's what's so important about breaking it down into kind of what I coach my clients on, with the sort of the three stages of figuring out what you want to do, is begin with you. Who are you, and your core values, and why you have those values? But then going out into the world and seeing, well, who's out there in the world that needs someone like me?
Mm.
And so the question you had was a little bit about how do you figure out whether there's an alignment?
Mm-hmm.
And what I tell clients, and I'll share with you, is the number one thing that employers are looking for is actually the number one thing that employees are looking for. And the number one thing that leaders are looking for, and salespeople or anybody that's trying to make a deal, is that it's all about, and this is really simple. And if you're taking notes, it's just a three-letter word, but it's all about the fit. So you've got to figure out, where do I fit in? Or if I have a job, how can I fit in? Because sometimes we need to modify and understand that we want to be on the same page in order to have our boss and ourselves, or our clients and our customers, fit in. And we're not
Mm.
going to be a perfect fit everywhere. And
Mm.
sometimes we may need to get some of our values met outside of life, which is where
Mm-hmm.
I've sort of grown in my business to say to my clients, I'm a life coach more than anything
Mm-hmm.
else.
Yeah.
Because, Felice, if creativity is important to you, I want you nurturing that creative side. That's probably why you
Mm-hmm.
started a podcast. That's probably why
Mm-hmm.
that's why you wear the clothes you do, and you
Mm-hmm.
love the fashion.
I had a
And you're going to,
newsletter in college. I had a website in college. Like it's just never, ever, ever stopped, ever. And
right,
it's not
right.
going to.
Yeah. And so and doing things that fulfill you on the outside, your side hustle or whatever you want to call it, you're going to show up better at work. because you're happier, you're more balanced, you're doing the things that satisfy that, and you're going to show up as a better person at work as well.
So you have to
Yeah.
nurture that side. And you said,
Yeah.
you can't have all, you may not meet all your values or have all your values in life. I think you meant at work. Like
Right.
it's
Right.
at work. You can't have it in life, but at work, maybe it's not, you can't check every box. But I want to check most of the boxes. It's not
We all
sufficient.
do.
I'm not doing the 80-20.
Yeah.
80%, none of my values, and I only get a 20.
Yeah.
No, it needs to be the other way around. 80%.
Yeah.
And then maybe
Yeah.
there's a 20 that I have to meet, get somewhere else. Because I want to be purpose driven. And if I'm purpose driven, I am values driven. And I think that produces better outcomes. So I think of two analogies here. Okay. Sometimes I'm just going to break it down because I love to shop and I love color and creativity and all that good stuff. Sometimes there's a dress and it is beautiful on the hanger, and somebody else puts it on and it's beautiful on them. And they have your same measurements, but it's beautiful on them. And then you put it on and it just doesn't fit. You can't explain why. That person seems to have the same numerical size that you have, the
Yeah.
same, but you can't explain why. But on this person, wow, stunning.
Yeah.
On you, you're like, this doesn't look good, right? The
Yeah.
dress isn't happy and you're not happy, right? And I also, because the dress is probably screaming to be taken off. The other thing that I point out to people when I do my trainings is I have a slide, and that slide shows apples and peaches. And I say, in very simplistic terms, apples and peaches are both pieces of fruit, and they're good in my view. They're both good, they're both delicious. I like both. But there
Yeah.
are going to be some places that they love apples. They may not even like a variety of apples. It may just be red delicious, and that's it. And they're doing apples all day, every day. And you can be the sweetest peach, the best peach on the tree, the biggest peach, the brightest, the most fragrant. It doesn't matter because they don't do peaches over there. They do,
Right.
right? And so if you are not an apple and you are a peach, it does not matter how good you are, how fragrant you are, how just beautiful and how many dishes they can make with you. Doesn't matter. You're not an apple. And when I told you this when we were preparing for this show, you said, yeah, that's right. It doesn't matter. You can be
Yeah.
good, great, awesome, amazing, but if it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit. Can you explain that?
Well, not only can I explain it, but it's sort of ironic that you've got that as a PowerPoint, and mine is an apple orchard and the apple pickers. And the storyline I give but I may have to join in on the peaches because that totally resonates, and I think the audience can relate to this as well. But the story I like to give is that you may be the best apple picker in the bunch. You may be the guy that is efficient and fast, and you get it done, and you are like busy, 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 and you are like the best apple picker in the bunch. But guess what? If you're the best apple picker in the bunch, but nobody else that's picking apples likes you and doesn't want to get to know you and certainly doesn't trust you, you're not going to be invited back because
Nope.
you're not fitting in with that group of people.
Yep.
And sometimes that will happen.
Sometimes that will happen, folks.
Yeah.
And I want you to understand that sometimes it's not even your fault.
Right.
Sometimes that's just the way, it's just the way it is.
Yep.
It doesn't matter. I remember I had a colleague come to me at one point, and he just could not explain why the director at the time, I wasn't a director, I was still staff attorney, why the director just didn't seem to like him, just for whatever reason. I didn't know because I was new and I just didn't really get involved in office politics in that way, so I wouldn't know. But I said, and he was lining up all the great things that he did, and I just said, listen, sometimes people, they just don't she doesn't like
Yeah.
you. That's just, it just is. And I don't know why. I don't know the why, but that person just doesn't like you. They don't feel like you are a good fit for
Right.
their organization or their office, and you may be great. And he went on to do great things elsewhere. But
Right.
for that particular office, he was not a good fit. It didn't have anything to do with whether he was good or professional or not. It's just he wasn't what she thought of would fit her profile of what she wanted for her office and her organization. Does that make sense?
It does, it does, and I especially have to help my clients understand this when they are looking to make a transition, because something can look great on paper, AKA the job description looks great. Oh, and 2 or 3 friends working there said, "Oh, this is a great place. I love working here. My colleagues love working here. It looks great on paper." But do you know statistically, most people will quit or get fired within the first 3 months.
Wow.
Because they don't do as much of an evaluation of what do I want? What's important to
Mhm.
me? What are my core values? And
Mhm.
is that in alignment with what the company needs or the
Mm.
promotion? I'm
Yes.
sure many people on this call realize they may have been promoted up to a point that they're not even doing the stuff they really love to do.
Oh, wow.
They've been
Yeah.
pushed along, pushed along, pushed along, and all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, oh, now I got to deal with all this stuff. I really like to deal with that stuff." And there's a disconnect.
There's a
Yeah,
disconnect. There's a disconnect. And, sometimes, people are promoted and it doesn't really tap into not only what they like, but what their gifts and talents are.
right,
So
right.
if you've been promoted and you don't, now you're expected to be a middle manager,
Yeah,
right? And maybe your gift and talent isn't being a middle manager, is not being a supervisor. If you
right.
are, a visionary or whatever, maybe your gift and talent is not supervisor. And so, how can we do better as an organization when we promote people, making sure that we stay dialed into and tapped into their gifts, their skills, their talents, because that's what made us promote them in the first place. That's what made us hire them in the first place. So, we as organizations need to do better,
Yeah,
right, with how what we delegate to people, how we assign people, because we want to get the very best out of people. So we don't want to get turned on and love someone's gifts and talents and skills because they're shining and they're a rock star, and then we get them into the promotion, or we hire them into this position, but we tell them to do something that's not really what turned us on to that person. Does that make
right.
sense?
And it's a big mistake that leaders make because the leaders are like, "Why are these people not doing what I want them to do?" And so one of the curiosities I give those leaders is, are you clearly communicating who you are and what your core values are so that they can come into alignment with you? Do they know what motivates you? Do they know your expectations? Do they have an agreement with that? But it's a two-way street. And I think that leaders can do so much good work when they take the time and energy to ask the employees, what's what exactly are you looking for? What's important to
Mhm.
you? How do
Yeah.
you want to contribute? How do you want to grow? Because inevitably, employees want to have a sense of agency. They want to
Yes.
feel like they're making a difference. They want to feel
Yes.
like they're contributing. They want to feel like they're working at the best level they can.
Yes, 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 yes.
And that's how
Well,
we have to make this connect.
and I think again, being a leader and having represented management, I think we as leaders need to be thinking about what's important to us, because we can't listen, it's only a halfway job if we go to the employee and say, well, what's important to you? We haven't even thought about
Yeah,
what's important to us, because they may say something that's completely, totally opposite of what's important to us, right? And so, what does
yeah,
that mean now? Right? So, we have to think about and be clear on our end about what's important. So, for example, I have had a client who said, I just don't like doing performance appraisals. I don't want to appraise people. I don't want to
yeah.
evaluate people's performance. But what does that mean for the employee on the client's team who values that feedback? who looks
Right.
forward to a performance appraisal, who wants to know areas of improvement. If the leader is just hates performance appraisals so much that they basically just do some sort of paper mache, just throw anything out there, let it stick. I'm going to just hit satisfactory on every button without doing a real critical observation and analysis of the performance of the individual. Well, when that individual gets that performance appraisal, they're not going to be happy. They're going to feel disrespected and undervalued and underappreciated because, and it's not that supervisor doesn't appreciate the person, it's that
Yeah.
supervisor doesn't like to do performance appraisals. Does that make sense, Liz? Do you see how that disconnect can happen there and how that can upset the relationship?
Absolutely. And that's where we have to acknowledge that there's that things will change. And you're right. As much as I'm an optimist and I look for the bright side, there is that part of everybody's job that's challenging, difficult, they don't want to do, but they have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an exercise I sometimes give my leaders is what part of it do you like to do? Are you good at? And what part of it do you not like to do? And then what are we going to do to give you more of what you like to do and less of those things that are challenging and difficult? And
Mm-hmm.
that does take sort of maybe an outside view or
Mm-hmm.
a coach or a friend that you
Mm-hmm.
can turn to and say, how do I get this back? And
Mm-hmm.
and whose responsibility is it? And I say, well, it is both. It's the leadership of the organization, but it's also the employee
Mm-hmm.
who has to take the initiative to say to the boss, these are my strengths. This is where I think I do well. I excel in this, this, and this. These are my challenges. What are we going to do about that? And maybe there's even somebody else on the team that's better suited to do that activity. And
Wow.
I could share one story along the lines of this. There was a period of time where I was coaching a lot of lawyers. I was working exclusively with lawyers and law firms that were trying to grow their business. And as the firms were growing, there were some obvious lawyers that were like, "I'm just burned out. I don't want to do this anymore. It's challenging. It's difficult." And I met with one lawyer in particular, and what he said to me was that when he got into the business, he was the rainmaker. He was out with the clients every night. He was wining and dining. He was building a book of business. He also loved showing up at court in the mornings. He loved the research. He loved digging in. He loved it all. And he loved it all for about 10 or 15 years. And then he got married, found the love of
Mm-hmm.
his life, had
Mm-hmm.
two small children, and
Mm-hmm.
his wife turned to him and said, "Hey, I'm a career woman as well. We are both in this together. We're raising these two children, but I need some help. You've either got to be home to cook a dinner or get these kids to school in the morning or pick them up after school. This is important. This is what you want to do. You said you wanted to do it." And that's what this lawyer told me. He's like, "My values have shifted. What I wanted when I first started out as a lawyer and was like the single guy, that's very different than where I am now. I'm married with
Yeah.
two kids." And he said to me, "But there's nobody in my office that can help me. There's
Mm-hmm.
nobody that can take on any of this. I'm the guy. This is all I do."
Mm-hmm.
And so he started with just the list, like breaking it really down. Like, what is he super, super busy with? What's his 9 to 5? Or in his situation, 8 in the morning till 8 at night. And that's
Yeah.
what it was, 8 in the morning till 8 at night. And I said, "Are you communicating those core values to the people around you, to the people that you work with, to your paralegals, the partners, everybody in the firm?" And
Mm-hmm.
initially he was like, "Why would I tell them my core values?"
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "So that they can get to know you and like you and trust you. You're building a camaraderie and you're sharing information." In 2 or 3 sessions, I'd ask him at each session, has he had
Mm-hmm.
this communication conversation? And he said, "No, no, no." And then there was one day he wrote me a text and he said, "Oh, can't wait to talk to you this week. I have great news." And I texted back. I said, "What's the great news?" And he said, "One of the partners in my office just got divorced." And when we
Wow.
got on the phone, I'm like, "Why is that good news?" He's like, "You don't understand. He's divorced. He now, he wants to go out every night. He wants to entertain the clients. He's got the bandwidth to do that." And
Yeah.
so he had talked to him about this lifestyle change that had happened to his partner. And the win-win situation is that his partner was like, "I'll give you all of my morning research and my dissertation work, and he's going to swap out and take those clients out to dinner. And I don't
Yeah.
think it would have happened if the possibilities hadn't come up and he hadn't nurtured those conversations and thought in a way, there is possibility that I can balance this out. Yeah.
That reminds me of a old family adage, and there's people who may have heard of this, but a closed mouth doesn't get fed.
Yeah.
Closed
Right.
mouth doesn't get fed. You got to speak up. You got to
Yeah.
ask for what you want. And you have to be patient with it. Speak it into existence
Yeah.
as well, because you never know how the universe will, Oprah says, is conspire to make things start to happen for you because you are speaking it, you are believing it. And that's a great story of how that
Yeah.
worked out for him. And I think more of us can be in that space where we are speaking out what our values are and opening up the lines of communication. So, just on a very micro level, where I use the supervisor evaluation scenario, just think how different that relationship would be if the supervisor just said to employee, listen, I don't like performance
Yeah.
appraisals. I don't like doing them. They take too much time. It has nothing to do with you. I respect you. I value you. Maybe you can help me by giving me a list of all the things that you believe you've accomplished throughout the
Yeah.
year. And let's sit down and talk about those. And I will give you my feedback. And then I will transfer that to an evaluation. Just you see how
Yeah.
easy that is to
Yeah.
improve the communication in the relationship so that everybody gets their needs met and it's a
Yeah.
win-win. Supervisor,
Yeah.
gets over the hump of the evaluation. Employee doesn't feel disrespected. They feel valued. They feel heard. Does that make sense?
It certainly does. And I think when you say it that way, you're like, let's make sure people feel valued and feel heard. And it's about opening lines of communication. And I'll give you another one of my Lizisms is that there's this question out there in the world that people get all the time. They get this at a networking event, they get this when they're gathering with family and friends, they get it in an interview. And the question is, so tell me about yourself. And if this was a live audience, I would say raise your hands if you love that question because very few people do. And yet, this tool, this little values activity, can give you the 5 answers to the question. So tell me about yourself, especially in an interview. Because when you're in an interview, that obviously you got to the interview probably because they have a resume or you've been recommended. So the answer is not where did you grow up? Where did you go to college? Where did you work? What skills do you have? They already know that. They have the resume. They've already gotten to know you. They're trying to decide if they like you, but more importantly is the trust. So
Mm,
the 5 most important things that you can answer when somebody says, "So tell me about yourself," is to go back to your core values so that you're
mm,
leading with, "This is who I am." So let me tell you about
mhm,
myself. I like to have fun. I love to
mhm,
travel. I'm on
mhm,
my way to Florida to do an offsite retreat for real estate agents because I
mhm,
want to help them make money because I know they're
mhm,
100% commission. I
mhm.
value sharing my knowledge as a life coach, as an executive coach, telling you who I am and using those 5 core values can open up so many more opportunities because you're being a little bit vulnerable, but you're also leading somebody down a path where you want to go.
So, Liz, but what about the situation where people say, I'm afraid that they may, if I tell them I value family time, I may not get the job. If I tell them that I love to travel and I like beautiful things and I love nature and I like to go travel the world and see all the, spots, maybe they won't hire me because they want somebody who's going to work, work, work because their model is all we do is work.
Right. And therein lies the challenge of, is that a good fit? And so I will
Mm,
agree with you. There is that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And you brought this up in another one of your calls. It's very hard for me to coach somebody who just needs to pay the rent. And
mm,
yet that's what I did for many, many years. I did workers' comp. I did vocational rehab. I worked with people
mhm,
out of jails, out of welfare, and my role
mhm,
was to help them get a job. And what I had to say and what I continue to say to my young adults. I've got a Boston University lacrosse player who graduated and is looking for a job. I also have an artist who's
An
living in New
artist.
York City. I think when I career coached my children, I think my career coaching of my own children was you can grow up and be and do anything you want. And they got stuck at the letter A because I've got Nate the artist and Nick the athlete. So I'm hoping they get to B, which is business, and C, which is some cash flow. But right now, they're following their dreams. And yet I'm not paying the rent anymore. So they do have to get a job. And so they will have to figure out, as I think it was Rashad Tabakawala said, when you're young and starting out, you take the least sucky job because you need to get a job. You need to pay the rent, you need to cover your expenses, and then you figure out how to fit into the organization. And then once you're there, you start to communicate your core values and what you can bring to the situation, and you work your way up.
But
For
what if I'm
example,
not in my 20s? What if I'm 30, 40, 50, 60 years old and I'm interviewing? I find myself in a position of
yeah,
interviewing, or, whether it's for a new job or a promotion, and I'm saying, family time,
yeah.
travel, those things are important to me. But they said, well, our motto is all we do is work. Whether they
Then
say it or they show it.
then you have a couple choices. And this is what I tell people that are in transition. I say, statistically, it's easier to get a job if you have a job. So
Mm,
if you can adjust to that job, if there's enough core values that meet your needs, and that value of I want flexibility, I want travel, I want fun, you may not get that job. That job's not a good
mhm,
fit. You
mhm,
need to go find another company that
mhm,
values what you value. And that
mhm,
may be a remote job.
mhm,
That,
mhm,
that you may need to compromise something.
mhm,
But I tell my clients, stop looking for things that are not a good fit. Don't
mhm,
waste your time on those jobs. Focus
mhm,
on the jobs because actually the employers are really looking for good people. The
mhm,
number one thing the employer is looking for is here's what we want, and they'll spell it out
mhm,
in their job description. They'll say, this is what we're looking for. And your
mhm.
job is to check the boxes so that when you do get an opportunity to have a conversation with them, you can show that you're a good fit. If you read on the job description that they're work, work, work all the time, you may need to present as I'm work, work, work all the time too, but I also like to take a vacation at the end of the year. You
Right,
might you might get hired, and then you've really got to figure out, okay, can I tolerate this till the end of the year?
right. Or they have a formal dress code, and I want to wear jeans to work. Right.
Right.
I once worked at a firm that had a business casual dress code. I loved it. I
Yeah.
love the fact that I could throw on jeans and a nice blazer and go to work. Because they figure you were working like a dog every day. You may as well dress the way you want to
Right.
dress, as long as it was, office appropriate, generally speaking.
Yeah.
Right. But I didn't have to wear a suit or anything like that. And I really appreciated that. And that goes to my creativity, right? Because I could be who I wanted to be. I could show up in my creative, floral blazer, and it was okay, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, we need you to wear navy, gray, and black every day.
Yeah.
So there's trade-offs.
Yeah.
And so folks, you have to get clear on what is a deal breaker for you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, and I never encourage people to stay somewhere where they're not happy. I
Right.
don't. I understand
Right.
it's better, it's easier to find a job if you already have one. I think that's
Yeah.
something as organizational leaders we need to
Mhm.
reconsider as well. Because
Yeah.
do you want the person, listen, do you want the person who sat in a job for a decade being unhappy?
Yeah.
They finally land a role with your organization. They're going to take 1 week off and they're going to bring their burned out bodies and minds and all the PTSD from the other job into your organization.
I
Or do
agree.
you want someone who had the wherewithal to say, you know what? I'm going to take some time off because I
Yeah.
realize that maybe I've been sitting in the same position for a very long time. Maybe there's some stuff I need to get off of me. Maybe there's some family time I need to attend to. Maybe I need to do coaching with Liz, or I need to go on a vacation. And so that when I step into my new opportunity, I'm bringing my best re energized self.
Yes. Yes. And I'm bringing this to the forefront after 25 years of career coaching, that it's easier to get a job if you have a job. But let me explain what that really means, because I do a lot of executive outplacement. So currently I'm working with Bank of the West, Bank of Montreal, banks that have merged. People get like they're just a line item and then they're out of work. So as I career coach them, they've been laid off to no fault of their own, and I've done this for Marriott. I've done this for many, many other companies that go through downsizing. So they're not working. So when I say to them, we're going to get you back to work, sometimes that means volunteering somewhere. Sometimes that means doing a side hustle or
I love
something
it.
that's going to build up their self-esteem so that they're not desperate, so that they're not at the bottom of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So what
Mm-hmm.
can I do to help you get back to work might mean just taking a class or travel, or taking care of family and friends. So when somebody says, "Well, what have you been up to?" I don't want them saying nothing. I'm out of
Yes,
work.
yes,
That's
yes.
why yeah. And part of the biggest challenge I have is boosting up people's self-confidence and their self-esteem, and getting them, doing an interesting activity, something they love, a hobby, a passion, while they're looking for work, makes them a little bit more focused on, I want to do something that fits into my core values. Yeah.
And sometimes that hobby, whatever it is that they chose to do, it winds up being an opportunity for them career wise. They end up saying, light bulb, if I can do
Yeah.
this 8 to 10 hours a day, I'm good. And sometimes
Yeah.
they're so good at whatever their hobby is that somebody recognizes that and they get brought on, and it's wow, I could actually. So sometimes it could take them in a new direction. They can be
Yeah.
redirected, which is also very positive. So Liz, we're coming closer to our time
Yeah.
here. So I want to dive into, let's just suppose that, there, listen, it's not a secret right now. The climate in terms of workplace relations is at
Ooh.
an all-time low. You have work stoppages happening, strikes, folks. That's what I
Yeah.
mean, all across the country. I
Yeah.
mean, you have articles in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal regularly about workplace issues. There's a lot of dissatisfaction out there. There's a lot of mistrust, distrust.
Yeah.
There's a lot of anxiety, right? We're now seeing a lot of people being called out based on sexual misconduct in the workplace. So there's just a lot happening in the
Yeah.
workplace, and it is not Candyland out there, and people are not going to sit pretty for a long time and
Yeah.
wait it out, right?
Right.
Because this is their health on the line sometimes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
suppose someone is at that point where you said either they're going to quit or get fired.
Yeah.
What happens? Like, is there an exit strategy? Like, what do you tell your clients?
Well, first, I tell my clients to take a deep breath, because you've just spun us into what I call the doom and gloom.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. This is a crazy world. We've got wars going on. We've got, like total chaos. And then, of course, we can pile on ageism and discrimination. And there's a lot of things that are telling us this is not good and you will not be successful. So, what I say is, let's take a deep breath. Let's go back and let's do an inventory of who you are, which is really
Mm-hmm.
why you asked me on the show. It's the core values. It's like, what is
Yeah.
important? And
Yeah.
once we figure that out, what's the smallest easy step that we can take? What's in our control? Because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times we blame it on everybody else. I'm not rich enough. I'm not smart enough. We look back at what we don't have, and we forget to look at all the wonderful things that we do have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And especially when it's career related or work related, I say to myself, okay, let's kind of put an X through that for the moment and put a heart on it. And just inside that heart is to write the word help. And
Mm-hmm.
if we flip that around to, who's out there in the world that I can help? What can I do to help the war crisis or the homeless crisis, or there's always somebody somewhere. And maybe this comes from my background where I worked with people that were out of prison and alcoholics and drug addicts and disabled. I'm like, there's a job for you. There's actually somebody in the world that you can help. And who are they and where are they? And if you dig into those core values and you start telling people, then opportunities and possibilities will come up.
Mhm, mhm. I love that. I like to start with, just gratitude,
Yeah.
being grateful. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, and I say gratitude, being grateful, and I write in my journal, and I'm grateful. Yet I know that there are people who are watching this who say, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, Felice,"
Yeah.
and "Yeah, yeah, yeah, Liz."
Yeah.
We get it.
Yeah.
We're gonna put a heart on it, but
Yeah.
I still have to go to work on Monday. I just had somebody call me last night and tell me they just left I'm not gonna use the word that they used, but it wasn't a good word
Yeah.
for a new workplace, not an old workplace, a new
Right.
job,
Yeah.
right? So old job was this way, person says new job is this way,
Yeah.
right? So I think there's some inventory that needs to be done there, like you talked
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
But there are still people, maybe they don't have those circumstances, but they still feel like, I cannot continue down this path.
Yeah.
I want to help people start thinking about, because you have to also realize that if you're unhappy, maybe you're not giving 100% in the role anymore. So although
Right.
you may be trying to um, put a smile on happy face, yes, we want that as an organization, but as an organization, I also want you to go where you feel that your needs are being met and you feel and you have greater job satisfaction. So, saying that, Liz, I mean, is there some sort of exit? I can't speak. Exit strategy that people can think about, using to help them start to make a transition.
There is, and I'm glad you asked, because a lot of my clients, that's what they want, is they want a little bit of a blueprint to kind of help them. And so one of the tools that I use, and it's really kind of a fun one, because it's decks of cards to help the clarity of what's in your control. And what's in your control is, and I call it a vista, because it's kind of the view and the vista, but it's also an acronym. Core values, which is really what I had fun talking with you today, and I'm glad you brought me on the podcast. The core values provide the foundation. And because we talked about our values changing, the values also kind of follow with us. So if this has always been an issue, wherever you go, it's still going to be there. So then you have to ask yourself, okay, what am I interested in? Which is the letter I. Have my
Mhm,
interests changed? Have my interests broadened? But
mhm,
also your skills. What are you
mhm,
good at? And
mhm,
sometimes when I'm coaching somebody who's been working for a long time, those skills might become what I call burnout skills. In other words, you've been doing it for so long, it's going to drive you crazy. Resume writing. I no longer, that burns me out to have to look at resumes and match them up to keywords. I now have subcontractors because I'm good at it, but if I do it too much, it's going to drive me crazy.
mhm,
And the last one is your traits, your
mhm,
personality traits. So it's not just what you're doing, it's who you're being. So
mhm.
helping clients put that blueprint together helps
I
them
love it.
understand, this is my vista. This is where I'm in my sweet spot. And I have lots of
I
fun
love it.
activities and journaling and gratitude, a couple that you've hit on. But sometimes it takes an outside perspective to help somebody put this in alignment, especially if you're a leader and you've got other people that are following you. You've
Mhm,
got to kind of check in on what am I doing well, and what do I need to delegate, what do I need support on, what do I need to let go of.
mhm.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And I think that there's space there to think back and reflect on the things that people always say you're really good at or they really
Yeah.
appreciate about you. And sometimes, I know we don't always like to hear this, but Sometimes it may require a pay cut. Maybe you don't get the same
Ah,
amount of money, but you're getting
right,
fulfilled in other ways, right? And I'm not
right.
saying, take a 70%, 50% pay cut, but maybe 10%, maybe
Yeah,
even 20% sometimes, if it gets you in a place of greater satisfaction. Because at the
yeah,
end of the day, we want you to go in and feel good
yeah.
every day, right? We want you
Right.
to love what you're doing, even in the hard times, because it's the love and the passion for what you're doing
Yeah,
that's going to get you through the hard times. It's going to get
right.
you through those big, major, colossal projects that require you to stay up all night or require you. I had a job, sometimes you used to conduct union elections when I was at the NLRB. You might have to wake up at 4 in the morning. You might have to wake
Uh-huh.
up at 3 a.m., right?
Yeah,
Because you have to drive somewhere to hold the union election,
yeah,
or in the wee hours of the morning for the night shift that's getting off, right?
yeah,
But you have to love what you're doing in order for that to make sense to you. Right.
right.
So I think that reflection, that inflection is really, really key. So, Liz, why don't we leave
Yeah.
off with some three main points that we want people to take away from this episode?
Oh my gosh. So the big finale. I would say that number one is to take the time to figure out the $1,000,000 question. What exactly are you looking for? And have it kind of concrete in your head, maybe answering the question, why? Not just the word on the list, but why is this important to me? Number two is start to communicate it to people. Start to let people know this is why I do the things I do because this is important to me. This is my core values. And number three, know that we can't do this alone. There's isolation, and then your head gets into it, and the voices in your head are going to be back to I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough. So when we think about it in the workplace, there's bosses, there's coworkers, there's colleagues, there's customers. Nothing happens in isolation. It takes a village. So tying those three together, you being clear on who you are, communicating it to the people that need to hear it, and then working together. I think that's my summary. And what about you?
I
What are your
I love
3
it.
takeaways?
I just love that everything you said. But you know, for me, I have mine's may be age specific for different age groups because I've also been
Yeah,
talking to people in their 20s.
yeah,
And I want to say it is not the end of the world.
right,
Our 20 something brothers and sisters. If you have not figured it all out and you are 25 years old or you're
yeah,
27, it is not the end of the world. You have your entire life, right? And so if you're in a position where it didn't work out or you had to leave and now you're doing something you didn't want to do, or maybe you moved to New York or you moved to LA, you took that amazing, awesome job, but you ended up having to move back home because it didn't work out, there's still time. You still have the
yeah,
rest of your life. So you don't have to figure it all out all at one time. Life is a continuing education course. The key is for you to learn from that experience and now apply what you learned to the next thing. So each time you get a little better, you get a little higher, you do a little better, and each time you learn, you learn, right? Because you don't want to live a life where you don't have any failures, you don't have any upsets,
right,
because that means you haven't learned. You got to be
right,
disappointed some of the time. You got to fall off your bike, scrape
yeah,
that knee a little bit to learn how to ride the bike without falling, right? So that's how I see it for those. For those who
right,
are in their 40s or even their 50s, or even older, is not too late. You don't have
right,
to feel like you have to stay in a role where you are just it's just become redundant. You're doing the same
yeah,
exact thing. You've been pushing that same exact button, for 20 years. I understand that people have their um personal matters that may require that they stay in a role. I'm not
yeah,
talking about that. I'm not
right,
talking about people who have
right,
health issues or they
yeah,
taking care of ill children. I'm talking about, if you don't have any of that, it's just fear that you can't step out on faith and do what you really want to do.
yeah,
It's not too late. You can do that. You can do it. And finally, I want to say, I think my takeaway is that there are places for everybody.
Right.
There's a place for everybody. If you have a strong work ethic,
Yeah.
you are good at what you do. You are a team player, right? And it depends on what team you're
Yeah.
on. I don't know if we could take a soccer player and ask them to be on the NBA, right? I don't know if we could take a star athlete and put them on a losing team and then complain that the star athlete isn't winning any games, right?
Right.
So we got to be realistic with that. But there are places where you are a good fit. You are a
Yeah.
perfect fit, and so seek out those opportunities. And the way that you do that is by identifying your values
Yeah.
and being honest. For organizations, and I know I'm running on, I want to say don't fill positions out of desperation.
Right.
Don't do it. Make sure that the person, your candidate, is really a good fit, not only for the organization, but for the people with whom they will be working and the person or people to whom they will be reporting. Do not fill positions out of desperation. And I've seen that happen a lot. I've seen
Oh, yeah.
HR officials say, "Oh, well, it's been vacant for so long and they really need somebody. And can't we just forget about all this other stuff and just hire them?" No,
Yeah.
no. You want to hire the right person, not
Right.
the person that's available because you're desperate, right?
Right.
And those are my takeaways, Liz.
I love it. I love it. We could go on, and I think that we should do another one of these because there's so much more, and it's hard to answer these questions that you and I have because we don't really know. Maybe we need to do something with an audience chiming in and asking their own questions. This has been fun. Thank you so much for the
Absolutely.
opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you for coming on and talking to us. And
Sure.
absolutely, we will do this again for you all.
Yeah.
We will even go live and take your questions. So if you have any topic ideas for Liz and I to cover in the future, and you want to hear more from Liz, our executive coach that's coming to educate us in values and more, you can email us at workingit@workit.com. And I am your host, Felice. And for this show, I was joined by my amazing guest, Liz Mohler. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you. And you can reach out and find me on LinkedIn. So I also have an article that I just posted a couple weeks ago all about the different stages. So for the young people looking for work, the middle managers, and those of you that are at that stage where you're ready to like transition. How do you, like we had talked about, how do you transition from one opportunity to another? The exit strategy. So there's a great article on my LinkedIn. So let me know that you saw this, heard this, reach out to me, and we'll be in touch.
Absolutely. Don't forget to like this video and hit subscribe. Thank you, everybody. Bye bye.